So, Sean, are you familiar with...
With you kicking the table? I am very familiar.
I hit it with my knee.
All right, kneeing the table. My
kneeing
apologies.
The table. There you go. Get it right.
Welcome to the Viking Invasion, the best place to get all of your Cleveland State sports news. My name is Sean McDonald, and as always, I'm joined by Matthew Johns.
Sean, how are you doing today?
I'm okay, Matt.
I'm okay too, Sean.
Okay. Later, we have an interview with men's head basketball coach Dennis Felton, where he talks about the team's early wins and losses and updates us on some current happenings around the program.
We have the interview with him later in the episode, but first, let's get right into the news and notes from the week.
The Cleveland State men's basketball team fell to in-state foe Kent State on Saturday, 72-62. The Vikings are now 2-5 to start the season. The Vikings were led by Anthony Wright, who recorded his first career double-double with 21 points and 11 rebounds. Fellow senior Kenny Carpenter had 14 points, all in the second half, and freshman Tyree Appleby added 13 points off the bench. The Vikings will look to rebound Wednesday when they travel north to take on Western Michigan. So, Matt, what were your overall takeaways from the game?
You know, it was about what I expected. Kent State had Cleveland State outsized all around. They had, I believe, two guys standing at 6'9", one at 7 foot. So it was a pretty rough game for the Vikings in the paint. And they were kind of shooting themselves in their own foot with some turnovers. Were very inconsistent on offense. The free throw issues were back. It wasn't something I expected them to win. They only lost by 10. Kind of worse if you actually watch the game. It looked like they should have lost by a lot more. It was encouraging that they were able to hang in there and fight their way back. They were within one in the second half. So that was good to see that they didn't just give up, but it ended up being just the terrible start to the game. I believe at one point they were almost 7 minutes straight without scoring a point. They weren't able to dig themselves out of that hole, and that really seems to be what the theme of the season. Yeah, they either start the game really bad and then play well in the second half but can't do enough, or they start the game really well and then fall apart in the second half. So it really comes down. They need to focus on putting together two solid halves instead of one really good half and one really bad half.
You know, there were some, positives of the game. Anthony Wright has been filling his role in the starting five really well. Evan Claiborne has been playing really well the past two games, but unfortunately Claiborne went down with a knee injury in the fourth quarter. We talked with Coach Felton about that in our interview with him, but there is no exact timetable set up for his return yet. So
yeah, he went down. It didn't look great. He was clutching the knee on the floor. He was down on the floor for probably a solid 3 to 4 minutes, but he was able to get up and walk off the floor under his own power with just a little bit of a limp. So that's encouraging, but I mean, we all know knees are kind of funny. But losing Claiborne would be pretty big due to the fact that Derek Sloan is just up in the air all the time. You never know when you're going to have him. And those two are really your big physical presences in the paint under the rim. And as CSU comes up in this tough part of their non-conference schedule against these bigger schools, they're really going to be hurting if they don't have either of those guys to defend the rim. Another thing to add about the game, too, with the offensive struggles, Cleveland State is really having a hard time getting an identity on offense. They've got 4, even 5 different guys who can put the ball in the basket and score in double digits every night. But they're still not getting any consistency from any of them besides really Kenny Carpenter and Anthony Wright. Outside of those two, Bobby Word, Dontel Highsmith, they'd put together several solid games in a row, both of them. And in this game, they were both held scoreless. So it's really coming down to when can all of these guys who can score get going. Because I think if they do, they can hang with just about anybody in the Horizon League. Now, obviously, it's not going to be perfect every time they play. You're not going to get all of them playing well on every single night, so that's unrealistic. But the precedent holds true. At some point, they need to focus on consistency on offense, especially out of these seniors who have the experience and should be playing better than they have.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with that might just be that there's so many different guards on this offense who can score and play. You're already starting 3 guards, and Tyree Appleby and Highsmith both play minutes that a starter would. It's really all going to come down each game to maybe who has the hot hand, But for Felton's offense to work, I do think that everybody on the court needs to be a scoring threat at all times.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the Claiborne injury and Derek Sloan's unavailableness, if that's a word. If both of them aren't able to go, that leaves pretty much your only two bigs as Stefan Kanic and Anthony Wright. Stefan Kanic's minutes have been dwindling over the past couple games. He hasn't really been a big impact player. So if he keeps losing minutes, with all of these guards able to score, we might be seeing, if these injuries occur and are more serious, we could see 4 guards and 1 forward on the floor coming up here.
And it's not something he hasn't done before. He's ran Highsmith, Appleby, Cash Word, or put Carpenter in there and just ran Wright as his only real big man.
It's going to maximize the issue that they're having guarding the rim in the paint. They're going to continue to be outsized. Even if they do have Claiborne and Sloan available, they're going to be outsized, but they don't have those guys. It's going to make the issue even worse.
All right, let's get right on over into volleyball. The Cleveland State volleyball team fell to Utah in the first round of the NCAA tournament Thursday by a score of 3-0. The team finished its season with a 22-8 record and earned its 3rd consecutive bid to the tournament.
The trio of dominant seniors found their ways into the record books in 3 categories as Gina Kilner finished her CSU career ranked 3rd all-time in assists with 4,461. Shannon Grega finished with 1,487 digs, good for 2nd all-time. And Alexis Middlebrooks finished 4th with 458 blocks and 6th with a .315 hitting percentage. Heading into next season, the Vikings and head coach Chuck Voss are going to need to fill those holes as these 3 CSU greats will be leaving.
Voss has already talked about how deep the team is this year in several interviews we've done with him on the podcast. So I don't think he'll have too much trouble filling those roles. You know, these 3 seniors, as good as they were trying to fill that leadership role that Grace Kauth left, who may have arguably been one of the best players to go through the program. So I don't think he's going to have a problem filling their roles or even competing for another Horizon League championship next year. The big weight will be, when does the program get the players they need and play the way they need to play to knock off one of these really great programs in the NCAA tournament, because I think they'll be back there next year.
They should be. I mean, that's 4 huge players, going back to Grace Kauth as well, that they're losing over these 2 years. So they're going to need some new leaders to step up as well. But I think Coach Voss is very good at what he does. He's going to have his girls ready to go. And I think, like you said, the team will be able to continue to really hold their dominance over the Horizon League. And maybe with the next group of these underclassmen they're going to be taking over, maybe that'll be the group that is able to get that big win in the NCAA tournament.
To move on over from Woodling to the Wolstein Center, the Cleveland State women's basketball team picked up its 3rd consecutive victory Friday with a 70-61 win over Niagara. The Vikings were led by senior Ashanti Abshaw, who put up 30 points, 6 rebounds, and 4 assists. In the win, senior Shade Bosley became the 5th Viking all-time to block 100 shots in her career. She now stands at 102. The Vikings return home Wednesday to take on Ohio University at 11 a.m. So, Matt, we've had a couple of games so far now in the women's season. What are your overall takeaways about the team?
I think they're definitely going to compete in the Horizon League this year. They've got a very sound starting 5, and as Coach Abiad alludes to a lot, they really have 6 starters on the team. So that kind of depth is really going to serve them well as they approach Horizon League play. Being led by Ashanti Abshaw and Kayla Livingston, it's tough to guard and defend for other teams because both of them are legitimate scoring threats and are perfectly capable of putting up 20 to 30 points a game, as we saw with Abshaw putting up 30 for the first time this season. And then when you factor in Olivia Voskuhl, who's very capable of putting up around 15 points when she needs to, Shade Bosley's defense, it's the perfect storm that has come together for this program. So I think once they do get to Horizon League play, it's going to be interesting to watch. I think they've got a really good shot to make something happen this year. And this is the year for them to do it when they've still got all of these players. After this year, they will be losing Kayla Livingston as she's a senior. The window will still be open next year, but I think this year is the year they really do need to do it.
The team being 5-2 so far and them taking on some of these bigger programs and still getting the wins, it's just really exciting to see. So we're going to go right into our interview with Dennis Felton.
This week we had men's basketball head coach Dennis Felton back on the show for a second time. Last time we spoke with him about the team before the season, so now we're going to get to hear from him about the team's first few games. We got updates on Evan Claiborne's injury at Kent State, talked about Tyree Appleby's early impact this season, and what the team is doing to beef up their protection in the paint.
So we're 7 games into the season. What are your overall takeaways on the team's performance so far?
Growing incrementally. Most days and just about every game we've played, we've gotten a little better.
So Tyree Appleby has made a pretty big impact so far, and fans are really starting to take notice. What does Appleby do that sets him apart and makes him such a high-impact player?
Well, he's got electric speed and quickness, and then you combine that with a really kind of good dynamic skill set, and he can be a handful. He's our kind of guard because of that dynamic ability to make things happen and create off the dribble and all that sort of thing. And as he's picking up very, very valuable experience as a freshman, and through that experience, as he grows and develops his understanding of how to really harness that speed and athleticism, kind of really growing his understanding of how to play the game, how to work the game. As a guard, he's just going to get better and better.
So is the plan for him to kind of keep the same role and come off the bench and kind of be that spark guy, or do you see him maybe moving to the starting 5?
For us, 2 things. Number one, every day is a new day for every guy on our team to prove their value to our team. There is no long-range plan. The players really have more to say about opportunity to play and contribute during the games and all that sort of thing. And number 2, starting isn't incredibly important either. I think in terms of players wanting to achieve more, it's all about more time on the court, who's on the game at the end of games, all of that sort of thing. So it's not as though. Also, a lot of times starting or coming off the bench has to do with the big picture in terms of rotations and how to best manage our way through games in terms of combinations of players on the court at the same time, and how that impacts my substitution pattern and just how to get through a 40-minute game with hopefully the best rotations that give us the best chance of winning.
So the last few games, the team has had trouble stopping people near the rim. What is the team doing to try to minimize the opponent's points in the paint?
Our defense, except for some lapses here or there, has been pretty staunch. We went against a team in our last game against Kent State who was very, very big, a lot bigger than us, yet we were able to reach our goal of keeping them to 39% shooting or lower. So our defensive efficiency overall was pretty solid, pretty much where we want it to be. I do think in the first half we weren't as good as we wanted to be in terms of winning the war in the paint. But fortunately, as the game went on, we got tougher, more determined, more relentless at doing some things that are really important to us to be able to defend teams that are that much bigger and have dominant inside players like at Kent State. And that revolves around fronting the post, so we never allowed direct feeds, and then backing that up with great help side defense to fight against the lobs over our front. I was very pleased with the progress that we made in that area, especially with Stefan Kenich. That's something that he has been struggling to be as good as we'd like him to be at, and in the second half was by far his best performance in that area of the game. And for anybody who watched the game, they know that their big guys spent a lot of time being frustrated in that second half, not being able to get the ball much in the paint. And that's how we have to do it. We have to do it as a gang. But even as we grow our roster and become bigger and go into games as not an undersized team, those defensive principles are always going to be core to who we are on the defensive end.
So the last few games, we've seen Stefan Kenich's minutes drop, and we've actually seen Claiborne get a lot more playing time. Has this been matchup dependent, or is Claiborne just really earning more playing time as he goes out throughout the season?
Yeah, Evan has been earning more playing time for sure. He really turned a corner in our practices leading into our Arkansas State game and has continued that trend. Now, of course, in this last game we played when we played against such a big physical front court that Kent State had, Evan's presence was really that much more important and needed, and he knew that going into the game. We really stressed the fact that he was going to have to play at a very high level, but also be very disciplined in order to avoid foul trouble, because we were going to need as much of him as we could get.
So Anthony Wright has been in the starting five for the last few games, and he showed everyone why with his double-double at Kent State. He can do a lot of what you'd expect from a typical forward, but his athleticism really shows on the court. Is Wright the kind of big man we should be expecting to see in your system?
He is a forward that can play on both ends of the floor from the three-point line on in. So in other words, he's got a versatility to be able to score and defend all over the floor. And yes, we do like that. As we make our roster, we'll be recruiting more and more forwards who have that kind of versatility. It's important to the style that we ultimately want to play.
So what your record doesn't show is that you've been in position to win every game besides the Rutgers game. Is closing out close games something you can practice with the team, or is it something the team's just going to have to learn from experience?
Both. We're attacking it every day. We're working on not only what the kinds of things that we want to do and close hard-fought games like that, but also doing a lot of talking about play with enough composure and poise in those moments of the game to win those moments, whether it's being a team that can get a stop on command or a team that executes what you want to do offensively, but then the other team has a lot to say about what's going to happen too, so you can execute perfectly, but they can execute well too, to be disruptive or take the ideal shot or offense away that you were trying to do. And then it comes down to players making plays. And really, that's where games are won and lost more often than a play. It's more about players being able to recognize what the defense does, responding with smart basketball judgment in the heat of the moment, based on what the defense shows you. And that takes more time for players and teams to, develop and figure out than it does to, execute a play that coaches taught us and that we've worked on over and over again. More times than not, it comes to players having to make adjustments according to what the defense shows and making good judgment plays to counter what the defense does.
So CSU basketball recorded its largest home opener since 2013, and you were a big part of CSU's marketing for the game. You were on the radio, you visited classrooms, you were pretty active on social media, and it paid off. It was a very big crowd that came out. How exciting was it for your players to take the court and see that the city came out to support them?
Well, I know that, the returning players, I'm sure they were thrilled to see, especially the big turnout of students that were there. For the new players, I'm sure they don't know, what to expect. If anything, they probably expect to be supported at the games. But I know all of us were very, very grateful for the fan support that did show up, and especially the students. And we're just going to continue working on kind of getting out in the community and getting out into everyone's faces and asking for their support and letting them and reminding them how important it is to our process of building our program, that they are in this with us and support us, especially our students. Then, when they show up, do everything we can to give them a lot to be proud of and excited about when they take notice of how hard our players are working, how hard they're competing, and see signals that the future is bright for Cleveland State basketball.
So this week we're going to do another segment of Sports Ball Corner. And this time, Matt has a topic he's going to surprise me with. So let's go ahead and hear it.
Are you familiar with the NFL's guidelines of having a third-party doctor with the team for concussion and injury purposes?
Somewhat.
It's basically to eliminate any idea that a team doctor would overlook the good of the player to get a player back on the field for the good of the team.
Mm-hmm. Mainly with concussions, right? Independent neurologists on the field.
Correct.
Spot concussions.
So there was a issue, I guess, I don't know if you can call it an issue, a situation this past couple of weeks when Ohio State played Michigan. And on the sideline, Ohio State's quarterback, J.T. Barrett, was allegedly hit in the knee with a camera, which led to him having to get a surgical procedure done on the knee. Barrett was starting and played the entire game against Wisconsin in the Big Ten Championship just 6 days after having knee surgery. So, Sean, my question to you is, do you think the NCAA needs to adapt a similar role to protect the athletes instead of letting team doctors and physicians possibly have ulterior motives when looking at the good of the players compared to the good of the team?
Well, when we talk about the NCAA, somebody playing a little bit hurt is probably, the least of the terrible things that are happening.
Well, there's playing a little bit hurt, and then there's playing 6 days after you got knee surgery.
Yeah, I don't know the extent of the scope. From what I believe, that there was cartilage moving around, and that was causing some pain. Now, I don't know anything about cartilage moving around, and I'm not really a great doctor with that. I think the reason, and I do agree with you, that there should be somebody who is independently saying, okay, this player can't play. But I think the reason we don't see that is because the big thing that the NFL is being criticized for and football is being criticized for, and why kids now aren't playing football as much as they used to, is concussion. So I think it would be perfect if we could go ahead and we could have a doctor say, okay, no, I'm going to get the final say on when he plays because you're going to put him out there and you're going to get him hurt. But from the other side, how much power should those doctors have? Because let's say, J.T. Barrett he's an anomaly. He's got almost every passing record at Ohio State, but he didn't bring in a national championship. That was kind of Cardale Jones. Mm-hmm. And people all this season, any slip-up he makes, are calling for Dwayne Haskins to come up and start. So if I'm J.T. Barrett, and I'm not because I could never do what he does, both the toughness it would take to play 6 days after a knee scope, and just everything else, the passing, the good looks,
the running,
the lack of awkwardness when you're talking to a microphone, all of those things. But if I'm him, there's nothing, concussion, knee, whatever, there's nothing that's taking me out of that Wisconsin game. Because if he goes out and he has a great performance, something rivaling what Cardale did, in 2014, J.T. Barrett can go from just another Ohio State quarterback to cementing himself one of the best Ohio State quarterbacks there. So I don't know if we want to have doctors who are holding players out for non-concussion related injuries when, even if they do put themselves in dangerous way. You're talking for J.T. Barrett. If he is able to get Ohio State into the playoff in that game, he's not going to have that great of an NFL career, of any NFL career. He would live and die off of the fame he'd gain from getting us to another championship. So I don't know if I'm J.T. Barrett, if I want a doctor to be able to say, no, you can't play, and take that opportunity away from me.
And at the end of the day, it didn't end up being a big deal, at least as far as we know. There was one sideline report saying that he was limping a little bit, and Dwayne Haskins was throwing on the sideline, getting ready to go in the game if needed. But J.T. Barrett did end up staying in the game. So at the end of the day, it ended up being okay. There was certainly a lot of risk involved. So I don't know. It's something to think about. Obviously, the primary factor should be health, especially for amateur athletes. They've got their academics, their whole life ahead of them yet, and they're not really guaranteed a spot at the next level to really make a living off of this game. So it's interesting. I like what you said. Barrett probably isn't going to have a real great NFL career just from the style that he plays. So this is really it for him. And if I were in his shoes, like you, I would never be. But if I were in his shoes and I had some doctor telling me, no, you're not playing, when I physically feel okay to play, I guess that would probably upset me as well.
And you have to look at it from, we say the doctor should keep him out, for what's best for the player. His knees, and most football players' knees, are just going to hurt their entire lives. That's what happens when you either run as fast as they do, when you have to put in the training as much as they do. And for J.T. Barrett, who's already, in his 5th year of college, he's pretty much already got his degree. He knows he's not going to do anything at the next level. You have a national championship ring. That's, economic value that he can get. Mm-hmm. And taking him out of that game let's say Dwayne Haskins plays, and let's say he plays and he does the same thing Cardale did years ago. That just destroys JT Barrett's brand as an Ohio State quarterback. Like I said, he's got almost every passing record. He's a great statistical guy, but he just hasn't done what Cardale did, which is unfair because he got, to sub in right at the end there. But he didn't bring home a championship like him, or he didn't bring somebody to a championship like Troy Smith. Those are the quarterback names we remember. We don't remember the guys who won almost every game, great statistical seasons. But if you don't bring in that championship and you're not going to go over to the next level, then, that game is quite literally one of the most important in his life, not only for his football career and a sense of winning accomplishment, but just for how much his autograph costs and how, if he can leverage that into branding after he's out. Or a media career. There's plenty of, reporters who were reporters because A, they played the game and they know the game very well, and B, because they can say, I was this Ohio State player. I have this championship ring, and so I can be the face of your radio station. Or a lot of people, they play and they can just have a whole career based off of I was this person and I did this thing for this team. And so the fans like him, and even if they're not the best reporter, they can still leverage that into their career. But there should be a line maybe drawn between knee injuries and concussions, and where's that line drawn? And it's one of those things where when you can conceivably draw the line anywhere, you can't really draw one, because if we're doing what's best for the player, they should probably not be playing football in the first place for health reasons.
Kudos to JT Barrett. There were a couple reports saying that he was rehabbing upwards of 15 hours a day to get ready. So that drive and dedication is really admirable on his part, and able to go out there and win the game. It was a okay performance for JT. He played well at spots. He made a couple of bad throws, but to be able to do that physically and mentally is very admirable.
Thank you for listening to the Viking Invasion. We will not be having an episode next week, but we will be back the following week with more of the podcast.
We have very important things to do next week, Sean. Our academic careers are on the line.
We're going to take the time to work on some of the behind-the-scenes stuff on the podcast, but we'll be back with you guys in 2 weeks. Make sure to visit thereservenews.com for plenty of basketball coverage over the next few weeks.
Yeah, and if you missed last week's episode and didn't hear our interview with recruit Deontay Johnson, make sure to head to our website and check that episode out.
And make sure that you like our podcast on YouTube and that you share it on Twitter with your friends. Anytime we have our podcast or any of our content shared, we really do appreciate it. Any share helps. If you share it and someone else shares it, and it just gets the podcast in the hands or in the ears of more people. We really just want to, make a good audio source for people to get their Cleveland State news.
Yeah, and we've had some nice comments on it too, and we really do appreciate those. And we hope that we have been of some service to you here over these first few episodes, and we hope that we can continue to be as the season goes on.
And on that note, we will see you next time.